Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our crypto fans. You have your gracious hosts, Robert, Carlos, and Matt here for another early morning session of the Deep Q Cast. Gentlemen, we've been on a roll lately doing these early morning ones. I'm kind of digging it here. You know,
I'm
we got
not.
Matt Reed drinking his favorite morning beverage of water. It's like the minimalist.
Yeah, keeping
How
it
you doing,
real.
man?
Very good, man. Like I said,
Yeah.
not loving the morning, but we got a dog, so I'm having to get adjust to like Carlos time, which is like 5 o'clock in the morning.
There you go. There you go. That's
Getting
a
there. It's
5 a.m.
taken a
5 a.m.
while.
is sleeping in for Carlos.
It probably is, yeah.
You gotta add in like a dog and two kids, and then 5 a.m.
Yeah.
becomes sleeping in. So I will
Yeah.
say though, that
Yeah.
is the best time of my day because it's the only time that like I can wake up and no one's bugging me for shit. So it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
It's your time,
Love
you know?
love being a dad, love having a puppy, all that sort of stuff. But there's something really
Yeah.
magical about waking up really early and just having a cup of coffee and being like, oh, this is my time.
Yeah. Yeah. Matt, you're more of a night owl, I'm guessing, then, right?
Yeah, normally I much prefer just
Yeah.
cranking until feel I'm tired, but rather than
Yeah.
starting off tired.
Yeah. 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 I know. Like, I feel like having some of these little nighttime sessions or morning sessions is good to have a little alone time. Yeah. Boys, well, you're drinking water though, man. What about you, Carlos?
Yeah.
You got your mushroom beverage or you got your double
I'm going
cappuccino or
I'm
oh,
somewhere in between. Good old classic American drip coffee for me this morning.
nice, nice, nice. I
Yeah.
had a little bit of cappuccino too. I didn't have time
Whew.
to grab the mug. I was having some tech issues this morning. I didn't have time to get a double
It's no
shot, so I just
good.
have my one. Gentlemen, some interesting news stuff coming out. We obviously we could talk a little. Maybe we could talk a little bit about Jackson Hole. Was watching that on Friday last week. What a great place to have a bunch of nerdy economists get together and talk about the future of economics in the world. I know there is also some. So obviously there's a few crypto things that came out. We could talk about volumes on Uniswap. Yeah, so I think we got some cool stuff to chat about today. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, we do.
I'm also sporting my fancy
Ooh,
Deep Q T-shirt.
so much
Loving
swag.
it. It's so soft on the skin. Let me tell you, it's just
So
it's like silk.
luxurious. Luxurious.
Very, 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 very. Yeah, yeah. I was talking about the Jackson Hole and Jerome Powell. You know, it's like it's kind of funny. Like leading up to it, it was like markets on hold, stand by. It's like they're like all this hype. You know, it's like ooh, what's gonna happen? Ooh, crypto, everything's trading steady. And then it came out. I'm like, this is absolutely nothing new.
Well,
Um,
it's been a pretty crazy week though. Like we've had Evergrande going into last week. There's a lot of stuff coming out of China, which is of particular concern. And
yeah.
especially the long end rates is like continually need to increase in yield. So I think there's definitely something there that people are thinking the Fed could go higher or stay higher for much longer than originally anticipated, which was cuts next year, basically, pretty much pricing in.
Hmm.
Um, so that I mean, I didn't listen to the Jackson Hole. I know Carlos did. He can probably comment on that and what was said there. I know the gist, but I think yeah, you've there's definitely some sparks in TradFi that are quite concerning. And the Evergrande for me was the biggest one last week, and I think they're trading like 80% down as of overnight, which is
Hmm.
pretty
Yeah, but
crazy.
that was like the world's slowest moving bankruptcy proceeding. And from what I understand, that's only for their US holdings. It's not their China holdings.
Yeah, well, that's the one that anyone can trade as well. So
Yeah.
Hmm. So you think the Ever was it the Ever you think the Evergrande news is more bearish for the? I, can you walk me through that, Matt?
it's bearish for China, obviously,
Yeah.
and their economic model of export is probably going to come to an end at some point.
Hmm.
And so they have to like move into something else. And they haven't really. I don't feel they have a plan of what that will be. They're trying to like. I think who's it in the 80s published? You've got to either be, and you can be an exporter, great if you're an upcoming nation. That'll work. You can bring in cash. You can train your people, invest in education, and then you need to become innovators
Hmm.
of new tech or whatever that might be. And I don't think they've really narrowed that bit down yet. And
Hmm.
then been
Yeah.
able to export their own. services, or have an internal market where people in China want to buy their own goods to service then the rest of the economy.
Well,
When
the
when
problem,
the importers stop buying, which seems to be happening as distributions then go to India or other countries where it's
I
cheaper
think that
labor.
the main problem that they have is that they don't really have a market for an internal market for anything. Their stock market is
Mm.
pretty much just like, a dummy market
State
for,
owned.
the government to, yeah, it's all state owned stuff. So like, why buy stock? And culturally and economically, the only thing that you really can invest in is real estate. And so you end up with this situation where there's all sorts of, people buying, real estate with their discretionary income. And you've got people like Evergrande that are, and they pre-fund it. So Evergrande will take people's money and then they'll, they'll build shit. And what ends up happening is that you have these massive real estate compounds that are effectively stores of value that no one lives in. So I think the FT reported that like estimated that effectively like they've got enough empty housing in China to house the entire population of France, something like 50 million people. So it's sort of like this weird bubble they have over there, and it's kind of their own making because, as Matt said, their economy is really more about investment than it is consumption. Like the average developed country, if you look at their GDP dispersion based on like consumer, consumption of goods and services versus investment, it's like 70-30 in the favor of consumption, right? Meaning you get people earn dollars and they spend those dollars and they, the economy keeps moving.
It's a good
And you,
fallback mechanism, especially if, like I said, if that's your primary function is to export goods, well then those buyers on the other end better be there because the minute they
yeah,
start to rescind their bids, then you're gonna need to have an internal market that can fill the gap.
yeah. And then China's actually flipped because China is 70% investment and 30% consumption. So
That's
you end up
crazy.
with a scenario where, everyone is like the country is basically taking all of their resources and churning it back into more investment. Um, and as Matt said, that's great as you're growing, right? But at some point you hit this curve, you're like, all right, we need to stop building shit that no one needs. We need to actually start, improving the lives of the people that
Productivity,
are,
investing in something
yeah,
productive.
yeah. So I think that the problem with China is really more like productive investment.
Hmm.
Where is it going? How are they allocating their resources? And probably far too much of it is going into like infra that no
Yeah.
one uses because like the average citizen of China cannot afford to buy a house or even like they've got these high speed rail trains that are fantastic, but the average citizen of China cannot afford a high speed rail ticket. So you end up with just like massive underconsumption of the goods that they're creating.
So and that would, in my mind, that would be deflationary for like Chinese real estate markets, right? Like you have this massive run up in real estate and then depressing prices, and then underlying Chinese citizens are a little bit poorer. I'm trying to back into also like how this would impact the U.S. too, right? So it's like you have, I mean, the China's a little bit more of I guess it's more like a global economic than it would be like necessarily a direct impact on the U.S. Especially the U.S. being an importer of Chinese goods.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends on how much China wants to stimulate their economy to kick the can down the road,
Mm-hmm.
right? If China decides that it's in their best interest to sort of print money, start creating more goods, right? That opens up the global supply chain. That's massively deflationary for the U.S. because we're
Yeah.
effectively, getting the benefit of Chinese stimulus because they're an export economy, right? They're going to print a
Hmm.
bunch of money. That money's going to go to the two manufacturers and exporters. Those cheap goods are going to find their way across the world, and they're going to be denominated in dollars, and it's going to be a fantastic thing for the U.S. from an inflationary perspective.
Yeah.
So, if the Chinese goes under, it's a different story because they just could be exporting a global financial crisis. My guess is that they'll just start, doing what China always does, which is stimulate, print, sweep stuff under the rug until
Sounds
you
like
don't want to
America.
do
What are you
that. You know,
doing? That's what
I
we
mean,
do.
speaking of which, that is exactly what we are going to be doing. So it's pretty that's pretty nice.
Yeah. It's funny. Also, I saw in the show notes is the brick meetings, which I thought was super interesting. How many countries, how many emerging countries are knocking at the brick door to gain access to membership? I thought that was super interesting, and I know we put in the comments is around the de-dollarization. Just like a lot of these countries want to get into direct trade agreements using their own sovereign currencies, and we've heard this. I over the past 10 years, I start hearing this increasingly more and more that people trying to move away from the dollar. And obviously, like during COVID, spending in the U.S. got super wacky, and our deficit has increased dramatically. Our cost of to service interest has also gone up. So, and then we obviously can't even raise a debt ceiling. So it's just like a lot of kind of like instability with sending signal. I saw still a super secure reserve asset, right? The U.S. dollar, but just like sending signals to the market that like more volatility or uncertainty than has been seen before, and you have a lot of these countries interested in de-dollarizing, which is going to put further pressure on the U.S. That was super
Yeah,
interesting.
but more importantly, though, 80% of world oil production now exists under the banner of existing BRICs countries,
Wow.
and they've all entered into an agreement to settle trade in local currencies. So, I mean,
Yeah,
if
that's
you think
big.
like the
That's
linchpin of
huge.
global dollar dominance has in the past been the petrodollar, right? Brokered with our deal with the Saudis in the 70s.
Hmm.
Um, you ask yourself, like, is this a good thing for America? No, it's not a good
No.
thing. I don't want to be a dollar doomer because like these things take time to work their way through the system, and quite honestly, as we discussed before, like a country losing its world reserve currency typically only comes through military conflict. So, I mean, like for everyone saying dollar doom and all this sort of stuff, the other thing I'd tell you is basically like, you know, you probably right over the next 50 to 100 years, maybe. But I
Yeah.
think this marks sort of like a step in the direction towards de-dollarization. It's not good for America. But at the same time, it's, I don't think it's going to be like a thing where, Jan 1, 2024, we're going to say to ourselves, all right, well, dollar's no longer the world reserve currency. Go fuck yourself, everybody. Um,
Yeah.
life is not good for you. The
Yeah.
one thing that I will say is that in my mind, there's actually a nice, easy way for the dollar to perpetuate more dollar reserve currency status that they're totally fucking up, and it has a direct correlation with crypto, which is the U.S. needs to pass sensible USD stablecoin legislation, right? Because right now, stablecoins actually represent, in my mind, more than anything, emerging markets finding a market for dollars because they need dollars, and there's clearly an appetite for dollars. Otherwise, Tether wouldn't be an $89 billion asset, and
Yeah.
Circle wouldn't be a $45 billion asset. The U.S. actually puts legislation around this, right? It allows them to sort of export dollar supremacy throughout the world via technological innovation, and in my mind, this is sort of like that's the killer app of crypto right now. Is
Hmm.
basically dollar payments and dollar stablecoins. And instead of embracing it and locking in dollar supremacy across the world, we're sort of saying to ourselves, you know what? Let's let someone else take that one. I think we're fumbling the bag.
Hmm. Yeah. I uh I wonder like how hard would it, I mean, is it like a first mover advantage? So obviously, the Euro bank could all like there in France, someone could launch a Euro stable coin, right? Now, other countries could launch their own stable coins. So it could still possibly follow like the trend, like the overall long-term trend of de-dollarization, but there'd be a first mover advantage, and maybe it would also be much slower, right? Like if we are late to the game and someone else comes in with other more sensible legislation that's being used, then it just helps perpetuate U.S. is taking a side seat to innovation in a new emerging technology.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, I don't think the euro is going to become the world's reserve currency because they put out stable coins. Like, I think there is some degree of people want dollar stable coins because dollar
Hmm.
transactions represent 80% of all transactions in the financial economy. Um, and for example, you probably had a fair number of, South Americans in B school that you knew, right? So like talk to someone from Argentina that grew up in Argentina, right? They
Yeah.
don't think about wealth in terms of Argentinian pesos. That's for goddamn sure,
Yeah.
right? Um,
I'm a
and
trillionaire.
majority of them, yeah, and the majority of them usually put that into to dollars, and you get the same thing in China. A lot of the wealthy Chinese people, right,
Hmm.
because their economy is so interlinked with the dollar. If they can move money out, they tend to store those in like dollar based assets.
Hmm.
And so it would follow that in the cryptocurrency world, right? If you give people easy access to the dollar, right, they will do that via U.S. stable coins. Um, and in my mind, I don't think that I think that the U.S. government embracing stablecoins perpetuates it, but I don't think, for example, that like the euro developing a euro stablecoin is going to allow them to take share from the dollar. If that
Okay.
makes any sense.
Yeah. So it's more about the the fact that we don't get sensible legislation around the stablecoin. It's more of just like a chokehold on the crypto industry at large because things need to operate in dollars. And by inhibiting the operation of dollars via stablecoins, you're choking the because there is no other
Yeah,
suitable alternative.
It's just
yeah, and
locking, yeah, locking
Yeah.
consumer locking, I guess.
and you're also depriving dollars from the U.S. banking system, right? Like imagine, I mean, where does Tether store its dollars?
JP Morgan? No.
Right. So you've got a Circle that primarily
Yeah.
custodies everything at Boney, right? Bank of New York, Mellon,
Uh,
and you've got Tether that has billions and billions of dollars sitting in some like unregulated shadow bank in the Bahamas somewhere. So I mean, it
yeah.
seems that it's kind of silly to let these sort of like shadow dollar accounts exist on offshore banking platforms when you could bring those dollars home
And
and
legitimize it a lot more.
generate,
Yeah.
legitimize it, generate money, control it. So it seems kind of silly from a legislative perspective to sort of sit there and be like, all right, we're just gonna let someone else handle this for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hopefully, I mean, all the crypto lobbyists are hard at work earning their big bucks trying to push this stuff through, you know? Man,
Yeah.
makes me wonder, maybe I should have switched careers and been a lobbyist, you know? Um, speaking of other stuff, you guys, I know one of the things we want to talk about is a little bit more about utility and crypto. I thought this is really interesting what we were talking about before, Carlos and Matt, just around Uniswap. Carlos, you posted, can we even call them tweets now? What do we call them? X's? It's so freaking weird now.
An X.
An
An
X,
X.
like you posted an X. I don't know. It's like,
Yeah.
what is that?
Doesn't sound right.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I'm still gonna say
Doesn't.
it's how we've like it's like changed. Yeah, it's so like, integral to our
An
language
X
now. I don't even know what
post.
to call. Yeah, it's terrible, terrible. I'm gonna
Oh
still
wait,
call it a
so,
tweet.
sorry. I was gonna say there's one other thing. Cos, you
Yeah.
mentioned for the Fed hiking stuff.
Oh yeah.
Have the Jackson Hole. Was it you saying about labor and housing?
Oh, I mean, like if to maybe take a switch back, right? Um, I think the line of Jackson Hole is basically Jerome Powell saying we're navigating by the stars under cloudy skies, which is very poetic, but effectively saying uh, fuck if I know. I think the Fed thinks that they're at the terminal rate, but they're also waiting for the lag in restrictive monetary policy to hit. And effectively, what they said, which is not new information, is we're going to be data dependent. If the labor market gets hot, or if the housing market gets hot, then we might need to change that plan. But
Hmm.
I think the consensus view on the street is really that Terminal rates are here. We're likely done. We might get a 25 bip, but we're likely done with any meaningful raises on this kind of hiking cycle. But the Fed's prepared to go higher for longer. Versus I think the market was really kind of planning on something along the lines of we're higher, and then come early 2024, we're going to start, cutting. I don't think that's going to be the case until something breaks, but there's a lot of shit that can break. So,
Yeah, I mean, you talk about real estate, right? Evergrande. Like, I feel like that's one of the potential shoes to drop here in the US.
But
The next one.
that was, yeah, I was looking at the Zillow price index. Like month on month, it's been up what I think about 1% gain
What
since
was the
last month.
sorry, the deal?
The house price
Home
for Zillow.
prices. Okay.
Yeah,
Zillow.
so kind of like yeah, so like not commercial side, but
Mhm.
actually I don't think Zillow includes commercial properties or in that actually. I'd have to double check. Um, but it will strip out. They'll be much higher value anyway. Most of those will get
Yeah.
stripped out because it's the median anyway. But yeah, it was like 1% year on year, but then 1% from last month to basically this month. So it's all pretty much coming in this last bucket, which was pretty interesting.
Wow.
Um,
Interesting.
so that could just be people like, trying to lock in, scrambling. I mean, I've been chatting with people that live in the building. Everyone was kind of like looking for houses, and
Hmm.
everyone's paying over ask by significant margins as well.
Really just to
Um,
find it. Do you think it's like a summer? Like it could be. You said month on month. So compared from
month on month.
July to
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean,
Okay.
I
that's
think
not crazy,
it's
right? 1%, okay, fine, is nothing. It's not
Yeah.
gonna,
But if you
that's,
annualize it, Matt, that's 12%.
yeah, well, New York was 3, so it's a bit higher, but like
Yeah.
that was
Okay.
across the whole US. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right.
it's
It's quite a lot.
it seems like it's more of a supply shock than anything
I
else,
think you're
though.
right. Yeah.
Because really, I think
Interesting.
what it comes down to is, let's say you own a home right now, and you bought that home, and you've got like a 2% mortgage or a 3% mortgage locked
Yeah.
in. Um, if you sell that home, you've got to sell it at a significantly higher price than what you
Yeah.
bought it for to justify rolling it into an 8% mortgage now. So like,
So yeah, find someone to do that.
yeah, exactly. Like no one's selling right now, because
Yeah.
why
Mm.
the fuck would you sell at a 2% rate to move into an 8% rate? So it's kind of, in my view, I think until rates start to go down, we're probably going to see a lot of people sitting on houses that, like, they're just never going to sell. They're never going to move into something else
Yeah. I
until they
heard
have
the
to.
I
Yeah.
heard the new dealer the new I was going to say new issue market. I don't know if they use that for real estate.
Yeah.
The new development market is really the only place where you can where they're seeing much transactions because the developers are willing to eat the spread. So if the mortgage is 7%, they'll give it to you a 5 and just eat the 2% because
Yeah.
they don't want to sit on inventory.
But that's
Yeah.
exactly what it comes down to, is the new housing developers, their business model is not to sit on inventory forever, right? Like at some point in time, they just have to cut their losses and get out of it. And I think that's why you're seeing that big spread in, new houses versus old, because
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. Matt, thank you, dude. We went on a total like wormhole.
Sorry, I
We
feel that was
totally
my
forgot to
fault
talk about the
mentioning
rates.
China
No,
and
man.
then
No, that was good. We were like talking about Evergrande and we are talking about regulation. It totally went on aside. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yeah, so guys, a lot of other news coming through on Uniswap that was crazy, Carlos, when you talked about your X tweet just about Uniswap processing more trades in Coinbase. That's wild to see how much that volume is played. And then obviously, we talked about this before, but Base launching through Coinbase to help facilitate decentralized exchange trading at lower costs and gas fees. It just feels like, to your point, like that's really where we could see a lot of stuff moving in the future.
yeah.
It gets a lot more cost effective.
So I actually, the way I think about this is that at some
Hmm.
point in time, on-chain is going to be a better total user experience than off-chain. Um, and I'm actually really, really, really happy that Coinbase is, adopting this and jumping in head first, because I think that's really that's the way they grow into a very large financial institution versus trying to nick, retail guys for,
Mm.
exchange fees. You just think of the economics of this. If you go to Coinbase's, website and look at their exchange fees for the average user, um, you typically are paying like a percent or more per transaction, unless you're dealing in large sizes. So, unless you're a whale, effectively, it's quite expensive to buy, Bitcoin on Coinbase. Um, Take that into consideration when you think on like, if I go to Uniswap, I can buy almost any coin that I can buy on a centralized exchange, on a decentralized exchange, and I'm going to pay on average 5 basis points in fees. And historically, the big cost differential is that I'd have to do that on the Ethereum main chain, or I'd need to pay to bridge assets from Ethereum to Polygon or Arbitrum or something like that, and worry about sort of like the potential loss or
Mhm.
accidentally bridging to the wrong wallet or something like that. Um, and so those gas fees were the big thing that was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go from a percentage to 5 basis points, but I'm also going to pay several dollars in gas fees and several more dollars in bridging fees or something
Mhm.
along those lines, and so it's just really expensive. But now that you have Base and other Ethereum L2s that are actually reasonably inexpensive, I can basically just put my money on a Coinbase wallet, bridge it to Base for practically nothing, right? For like pennies, and then
Mhm.
I can deal on Uniswap for 5 basis points and pay a gas fee once again of like a penny. So all in, my total cost to buy and sell cryptocurrency goes from like a percent per transaction to 5 basis points. We're talking pretty large percentage change downward in overall usage. So I
Yeah.
personally think that in the next cycle, like the more usable um, and more cost efficient on chain activities are going to be, the more we're just going to see everything move on chain, which is, pretty amazing. So it's really more a function of, I think of it like the on chain's broadband moment,
Yeah.
right? Like where we talked about this before, like, you go from, downloading one MP3 every 12 hours to being able to listen to an entire catalog of music streaming on demand whenever you feel like it. That's a whole different game changer for the internet. And likewise, on Ethereum, mainnet, you effectively go from like $1 to $10 depending on spikes, gas fees down to pennies on an Ethereum layer two. But you keep the same trusted sort of like infrastructure, meaning I'm dealing on Coinbase Base, which is a company I know and trust, on Ethereum, which is a chain which is reasonably secure and that I also trust.
Yeah.
And bingo bango, like life gets pretty cool.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And then obviously, you talk about stable coins as being like the killer app, right? So it's like it just makes it a lot easier for people to migrate into stable coins and just the digital, just the blockchain ecosphere.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that is sort of cool as well. If you saw this week that Coinbase actually bought a large share of Circle.
Hmm.
And I guess there's two really amazing things about that. The first is that unlocks a very large portion of interest revenue that Circle gets from, or excuse me, that Coinbase now gets from Circle, because Circle's got like 50 billion in assets or something like that, and generating 5% right now on interest charges. That's fantastic for Coinbase
Hmm.
shareholders. It's a great source of revenue. But then if you also read the roadmap for Circle, they put out a presentation that talked about how sort of their next growth or their next, uh, level of adoption is basically providing, wallets for, online payments. So providing an SDK for someone like Shopify or Amazon or something like that to basically include stablecoin purchases into their app, which I also think is really cool because effectively you can do that now, right? You can take a USDC transaction on an alt chain or a
Hmm.
layer two chain, and that'll cost you a penny, right? And if you're a retailer right now, how much do you pay to put on Stripe or add yen or something like that onto your site to take, credit card payments. It's like 2%.
It doesn't even have to cost that anymore with Uniswap X because they take out the transaction cost, the gas fee component altogether.
Yeah.
Basically let people bid and to lower the prices for the flow. So if you want to swap, then you can basically do it transaction costlessly, and anyone on the other end of that, market makers effectively will get a share, will give back some of the MEV or something else that they might be arbing back to the into the form of the cheaper price. And then so
I
the
would like,
user doesn't pay gas costs and generally will get a cheaper price. I've been looking at the market share has been increasing. It only launched last month, but that's
Mhm.
another big win for the consumer, the user. Like you say, Clark's getting better pricing, better experience overall on DeFi.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you think about all the costs that are done to transact with a credit card online. Um, there's a lot of cost savings. But one of the things that I haven't been able to think through in my mind, curious if you gentlemen have thoughts on this, which is like how this nets to the end use. Like you need the users to feel the benefit, right? I mean, you have like tech tech folks that are super interested in just doing this because it's new and it's a shiny new toy, and that's enough of a thrill for them to do it. But to get like in mass, there has to be some way for them to feel the benefits of that. And I just wonder how, like, it seems like people that perhaps don't have access to credit, or it's hard to have a like a checking account or a bank account. This is something easier. Like I imagine myself in the future where like you have someone that's like singing on the side of a street, and they'll have like a QR code, and I can just like send him a US like a stable coin, like instead of me throwing a dollar into a bucket. And this person will have access to, I mean, generally like, they'll have access to digital cash that they can use to transact. Like how do we get like just like people like in mass that don't necessarily need, they still have access to credit, like how will this be more cost effective to them? Is it just like they'll save on, they'll just get more reward like like because a credit card they'll the merchant's paying like 2 or 3% fees on top of that, but the consumer isn't, so just wondering like
Yeah.
how people are going to get incentivized to move it forward.
I
By
mean, I
credit,
think
you
it,
just mean like a credit card, like a, or do you actually mean like a loan to somebody?
Like a credit card. So like when I want to
Yeah,
make a
like
transaction
a debit
online, if
card or something.
yeah, exactly. Like I
Yeah,
need a debit
okay.
card, right? But like there are people that I can see how this can serve people that may perhaps don't have a bank account, right? And so they
Yeah.
don't, but like those aren't that's maybe not the majority of consumers online, right?
I only
It's
ask
because
because in the UK, credit card is the debt version of a debit
oh,
card, so I just wanted to clarify.
tomato
But
tomato.
yeah, you basically how do you how do you spend cash? What's the benefit? How does this cheapen things? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you said, if we wanted to give money to a busker, say, or something like that.
Hmm.
Imagine doing that now in a foreign country. Like you could literally
Hmm.
just pay someone, not have to worry about the transaction fees. Like you just transact. You'll get a price for it, of course, but hopefully with
Yeah.
this process becoming more efficient, you're going to be very close to what the market rates are anyway in real time. So you should be able to transact on the fly in any country globally,
Yeah.
which is
It'd
I
be
think that's
interesting if there was a
pretty
way to
cool.
like for people to really understand the savings that they receive. Like if I could look at overall like my you have like on a
Well,
credit card statement like
it,
what I spent
it
over the year, like just
yeah,
to
it's
like
hard,
show.
I
right?
think
Because you don't
it very
get the
much depends.
transparency. With this, you do, so you'd be able to see
Mm,
exactly if you did a transaction, over Uniswap or Uniswap X, for instance. Okay, what was the saving to me? Like it might just be gas fees, but then you
mm,
compound that over years, compared to like guarantee, or really what you're doing. Like if you're doing international payments, that's more where this thing kicks in. I think
mm,
there's a
Well,
normally a
I'm
5%
actually even think
tax.
I even think
Oh,
just for just general stable coins, right? Let's take out the FX component or the transaction across like different pairs. Let's just say like I'm
mm,
transacting in stable coins, right? If you ever worked or seen the way like an online retailer works, right? Let's say they put in Stripe or something else or PayPal or I mean, Toast or whatever they do, right? Um, you're gonna have credit card fees that are in excess of like 2%, right? And then you're also going to have things like chargebacks and other things where effectively like the credit card company or the payment processor can freeze funds or hold funds for however long they need to until they feel like things settle. So you end up with a very, very, very high cost structure for someone like a general like retailer putting in stuff. I could very easily see somebody, if I'm a retailer, saying, okay, well, I'm just going to give you a discount, or I'm going to lower my prices if you deal on a stable coin that is cash and comes to me immediately, right? Rather than having to deal with a payment processor that's going to take, a 2% fee plus be able to hold my money for days or weeks while I'm waiting for it.
Or
To me, that's sort of like it's a massive price increase. And, I think the market will figure it out. Like either retailers will just say, all right, that's my money, so you don't really get it, or they'll find ways to incentivize people to use stable coins by giving them discounts or points or rewards or something along those lines, because the economics will force them to do so.
yeah, 'cause that's what I was thinking of, like some like loyalty points or some way for them to do that. Who knows? Maybe eventually it'll get to a point where the price will be the price. But if you want to use it, like I find a lot of places in New York, you'll go to a nice restaurant or whatever that usually asks for cash. They'll charge extra. They'll be like, okay, you want to pay with your credit card? That's fine, but you have to pay an extra 3%. They're like market on top of the. So yeah, to your point, like there is a way that you could probably funnel some of that back into the end user to increase participation. Interesting, guys.
And
Yeah.
I do generally think from the international payments as well, like out of every like $200 you send, at least over 5% of that is eaten just in fees for that payment. That's from like the World Bank. So if you can make that as close to zero as possible, then that's better for whoever's sending the cash, right? Whether that be corporate, me or you or someone else on the street sending money to go somewhere or do something else. So I think there's a lot of use cases
Yeah.
where you're starting
Interesting.
to see.
I mean, I can tell you right now that, so if you think of like the revenue that a large, what we'll call money center bank makes off of their foreign exchange practice, which is basically converting one currency to another currency, right? Um, at Deutsche Bank, let's call it, you know, well, I'll tell you probably, I mean, it's $1 billion plus total business, but I'd say 20% of the total foreign exchange pie comes from what I'd call like payments flow, which are people who aren't trading foreign exchange because they have a view on the foreign exchange market, but rather just because like operationally I need to buy something in a foreign country and I swipe a card. Or, I'm a large corporation and I've got to make payroll in a different company, or a different currency. And, if you are trading it for the sake of trading it, you tend to be spread sensitive, and so the bank will charge you this much of a spread. If you're just like a random dude who's in Europe swiping a credit card, then, Amex is going to take their 2% processing fee. They're going to have like another 1% foreign exchange fee. And then the bank is going to give them a rate, which they just take, they don't do anything to negotiate it down or anything like that. And the rate that you get from a bank, rather than being this wide for like an institutional buyer, is going to be like this wide for, a retail buyer. So you're talking just massive, massive, massive spreads, massive, massive profit centers as well. Right. Which is maybe a reason why, if you're a bank, you're actually lobbying really hard to make sure that like stable coins don't get huge adoption. Because
Yeah.
imagine the workflow of going from swiping your Amex in London, in pound sterling, paying a 2% fee there, paying a 1% charge to Amex to have a foreign exchange transaction on your card, and then taking a super widespread, dollar sterling transaction at JP Morgan, right? All for that to settle down at your bank account. You paid 5% away versus having a sterling stable coin, and you go on, use like USDC Pay or something along those lines, right? And you pay, nothing. You pay like a cent. You pay 1 penny
Yeah.
to settle that transaction in sterling, and then it has Uniswap X in the background that does a dollar stablecoin versus a euro stablecoin, or versus a sterling stablecoin processes. You pay 5 basis points on that, right? And then maybe another cent to settle down your USD leg. into your USD wallet, and suddenly you go from a 5% transaction to, 5 basis points all in. Like, that's fucking crazy.
It is crazy. You do that over, hundreds of billions of dollars in transactions, right? Like it's wild how much money that is.
Yeah.
I can see
So
why.
like, once again, when people say, "Oh shit," like, there's no utility in crypto, I'm like, you just wait. You literally just wait, because it's going to come. The economics of this are crazy.
Yeah,
Which is once again one of the reasons why I think if you're a developed nation with a huge banking sector, chances are that banking sector is lobbying very hard to not have crypto cannibalize its lunch.
yeah. I'm a very firm believer that value will find its way through. It just might be on a time cycle that might be a little bit longer. You can delay it, but you can't stop it. You can slow it down, but you can't stop it because like value will come through eventually.
Yeah,
Super
and I mean,
interesting, guys.
it's seeing. You even saw, like, Shopify. So for example, Shopify launched this week with USDC on
Hmm.
their platform, and they're using Solana. My guess is they're using Solana because it's really cheap and fast
Yeah,
to do. But I'd imagine that will, I mean, it'll probably end up, they'll probably have multiple chains you can settle on, at your preference,
totally. Why would
inclusive
they
of
stop it there?
Ethereum
Right.
and
Totally.
yeah. And the same thing with, PayPal. They've launched theirs, and they said they're starting with Ethereum, but they're going to launch across multiple chains. In fact, when Coinbase bought USDC, they basically said we're going to increase this out to 6 more chains. So it's just going to be sort of like chain ubiquity, really cheap, really fast transactions in USDC across a number of different places. And it should be, and I think you even saw that. Um, there's a guy on Twitter that broke the news, and he called it in advance. And one of the ways that he found it was just going through job postings and seeing posts on Shopify for basically like blockchain engineers and Solidity to devs. Um, and so he found similar job postings at Amazon and Alibaba. So, like, we've got Shopify doing integration of USDC now. Like, just think what happens
Not a
when you
big
get
leap, yeah.
Amazon. Yeah, it's not a
Yeah.
very big leap, at least for them to pilot it. So
No,
there could be a lot of utility going through the pipe right now.
it's super interesting, you guys. Interesting. I know. We had one more topic we want to get to. I know we're kind of bumping up against on time, but just the OnlyFans, which is a very very interesting company. Carlos, I saw you posted in our group chat over the weekend that they made an acquisition of ETH. So following MicroStrategy's business model, but acquiring something a little bit more sexy in my opinion than Bitcoin. So acquiring some ETH. Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
So it's actually kind of interesting because they do have a history of being debanked, right? Like, they're a UK company, and they've had a hard. I mean, they print cash. They made like $500 million of profits, and the owner paid himself like a $380 million dividend. Right? So they're pouring off cash, but they can't go public, or they haven't been able to go public because people view them as an adult entertainment site, so they have difficulty accessing banking and capital
Yeah.
markets. And so it's kind of rife for someone to say, all right, fine, well, I'm just going to go put my business onto a decentralized, uncensored financial ecosystem, and there you go. And there's also kind of an interesting take on this, which is, one of the killer apps of Coinbase Base so far has been this app called Friends Tech. And Friends Tech is basically a decentralized social media site where, in order to follow somebody, you basically buy equity in their Friend Tech token. And that accrues to the creator. But it also gives the person who purchases those tokens access to special content. So previously, that special content was effectively text only, but they've recently implemented the ability to put on pictures. So And you've got people like crypto Twitter influencers that are basically making, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a week, shilling their own personal tokens on Friends Tech so that people can get, crypto alpha from them. Imagine what happens when you put on, OnlyFans influencers and that sort of stuff on a, censor proof site that you post pictures, give your fans exclusive content, and earn Ethereum in the process. Like, that seems to me like it's a pretty large use case.
Huge use case. Hey, it's kind of, it's so, it's like, we should have known that if there was going to be one industry that would probably move into this first, it would be the adult entertainment industry. It's like,
I know. It probably doesn't do anything for the credibility of crypto.
Yeah,
Look,
no.
we finally have a mainstream consumer application that's using crypto.
Utilities
What is
here.
it?
it's a legitimate business.
It's a legitimate business that's helping young women afford college educations. Okay, so just
Always.
you.
Always, dude, guys. That's wild. Yeah, it's super fascinating. Guys, I know we're bumping up on a little bit on time. Maybe we want to cut it here, unless there are any parting thoughts from you two gurus.
No, I mean, the only thing that I'll say is that if you're investing in OnlyFans models who are going on Friends Tech, just remember it's an investment.
Not financial advice. Not financial advice.
If you're trying to explain to your significant other where all that cash is going, just let them know. Listen, honey, this is an investment.
It's a mentorship.
Yeah.
It's hilarious, you guys. Thanks so much for joining this morning. It was great to see you boys.
All right. Cheers, boys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. See ya. Bye.
Bye.